All right. I'm going to start by saying a few words in Italian first for our guests. Ora comincio in italiano per gli ospiti. Dopo tutto il resto sarà in inglese. Ok. So, welcome. Benvenuti a questa prima dei 2 giornate di presentazioni delle tesi dei studenti del Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Domani, se avete tempo, potete venire a vedere le altre 2 presentazioni che sono collegate a start-up che hanno partecipato al programma MIT Design X. Queste di oggi invece sono queste 3 qua. Dopo questa introduzione ci saranno 3 presentazioni sull'eredità del Venice Project Center, che va avanti da 35 anni, sul come facilitare l'acquisto della casa per i residenti e su chi sono e cosa fanno i nuovi cittadini di Venezia. Alcuni di voi siete stati intervistati e sapete di cosa si tratta. Domani invece 2 altre presentazioni su Rehab, che è una startup di Murano che ricicla gli scarti di vetro, e To Gift, che è una startup di Padova che permette il finanziamento di non profit attraverso store cards, domani alle 11. Per quelli che non ci conoscessero, ci chiamiamo Serendipity, che vuol dire Serenissima Development and Preservation Through Technology. È una società benefit da me fondata che ha in gestione questo spazio. L'obiettivo di Serendipity è di ripopolare la città, niente proprio di meno, offrendo possibilità di lavoro ai nuovi residenti, creando lavoro. Domani vedrete degli esempi delle start-up che stiamo incubando appunto per questo. Questo spazio, che noi chiamiamo Fabbrica H3, come potete vedere era una chiesa, ma per chi non lo sapesse, dopo essere stata una chiesa è stata una fabbrica di maglieria. Si chiamava Aereo e questi piani che vedete dietro al vetro continuavano fino in fondo alle absidi, che erano dipinte tutte di bianco, e per 100 anni qua sono state prodotte magliette. Poi nei primi 2000 il Comune di Venezia, con fondi europei, ha fatto questo restauro che vedete, ritirando fuori gli affreschi, tagliando i piani e creando questo cubo di vetro e di acciaio che è stato creato proprio per essere un incubatore di start-up. Noi l'abbiamo preso in mano nel 2017 e lo abbiamo fino a fine 2027. Cosa fa Serendipity? Brevemente, facciamo 3 cose principalmente: ricerca, cultura e start-up. Oggi parliamo di ricerca, ma vi dico brevemente anche le 2 altre cose. Per la cultura c'è un programma che si chiama Cosmo, gestito da Emanuele Vilch-Barberio, che durante soprattutto i weekend crea e coproduce spettacoli, soprattutto musicali, in questi spazi molto all'avanguardia. Se avete occasione di venire, vi invito alle prossime performance. Per quanto riguarda le start-up, come dicevo, dall'anno scorso ogni anno selezioniamo 10 start-up dal territorio e che vengono poi seguite da docenti del MIT di Boston, che vengono appositamente da Boston a seguire ogni anno 10 start-up. Lunedì, che viene tra una settimana, verranno presentate le 10 start-up che hanno appena concluso il secondo programma di quest'anno. Se potete venire, stesso orario, stesso luogo, vedete 10 start-up molto, molto interessanti. E ultima parte è appunto la ricerca, che vi verrà spiegata meglio dalla prima tesi che presentiamo, ma vi faccio un breve cenno sul Venice Project Center, che è un centro del Worcester Polytechnic Institute, che è un politecnico di ingegneria del Massachusetts, fondato nel 1865, l'anno prima dell'annessione di Venezia alla Repubblica, anzi al Regno d'Italia. È una piccola scuola con solo 5.000 undergraduate, con tanti tipi di lauree, ma soprattutto a questo programma che oggi vedrete, che è molto unico nel panorama delle università, anche dei politecnici americani, perché tutti i nostri studenti devono fare 2 tesi di laurea invece che una all'ultimo anno è come quelle che si fanno dappertutto. Quella del penultimo anno, che è quelle che vedete qua oggi, sono tesi interdisciplinari, appositamente fatte perché gli studenti vengano calati in realtà sociali specifiche, speciali, per applicare quello che imparano a scuola al mondo vero. Qua a Venezia noi operiamo dal 1988, niente un po' di meno. Eravamo i primi di questa mappa e adesso abbiamo ben più di 50 siti in tutto il mondo in cui mandiamo questi studenti a studiare realtà locali e soprattutto ad aiutare organizzazioni locali a portare avanti i propri programmi. Il Venice Project Center non ve lo spiego perché la prima tesi che vedrete tra poco è dedicata al nostro 35esimo anniversario. Vi dico solo, se avete curiosità di vedere cosa abbiamo fatto in questi 35 anni, andate in questo sito, vedrete cose molto belle e molto interessanti, che comunque verranno spiegate tra pochissimo. Allora, prima di passare la parola agli studenti, voglio ringraziarvi per essere venuti questo pomeriggio qui da noi. Tutto quello che stiamo facendo viene registrato e verrà messo sul nostro sito YouTube, non è in streaming però oggi. Ringraziamo il Comune che è proprietario di questo spazio che ce l'ha dato in concessione. Ringrazio lo staff di Serendipity, come al solito, per aver messo in piedi tutto questo programma, e quello di domani e anche quello di lunedì prossimo. Tutti quelli che hanno collaborato con noi vi ringraziamo, molti di voi sono stati anche intervistati e vi ringraziamo per questo. E volevo ringraziare la mia collega Melissa Belz, che è l'altra co-relatrice di tutte le tesi che vedrete oggi insieme a me. E poi ringrazio i ragazzi della VPI che sono qui dal 20 di ottobre, hanno cominciato la preparazione ancora a settembre in America e poi sono venuti a fine ottobre e adesso stanno concludendo le loro tesi. Ricordo a tutti voi, ospiti qui, che se vi interessasse potreste parlare con me di tesi che interessano a voi, che potremmo fare per voi con gli studenti dei prossimi turni. Quindi alla fine di tutto questo, durante l'aperitivo, se avete qualche idea su questo, fatemi sapere. E quindi da adesso passiamo all'inglese e do la parola al primo team che parlerà dell'eredità del Venice Project Center a Venezia. Please, come on up. In qualsiasi... Grazie. In qualsiasi momento, alla fine o anche durante, se volete, se avete delle domande, volete che faccia da traduttore, sono disponibile a tradurre per voi, altrimenti aspettate che finiscano e poi chiedete.
Hi, everybody. On behalf of all the WPI teams, we would like to welcome you to our presentations today. We are a group of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts in the USA, as previously mentioned, and our project is examining the legacy of the Venice Project Center through the use of interactive storytelling. My name is Nicole.
I'm Keenan.
I'm Joel.
I'm Brooke.
I'm Brenna.
All right, so the goal of our project is to tell the story of the Venice Project Center and its impacts.
So, the Venice Project Center is a multi-decade research project For the past 35 years, it has been working to continuously collect, update, disseminate research and data. It was created in 1988 by Professor Fabio Carrera, who was just up here speaking, and almost 900 students have performed research at the Venice Project Center during this time period. And there have been 246 projects completed over a 35-year history.
So the Venice Project Center has always had data dissemination as a really important part of what it does. In the early days of the Venice Project Center, that looked like floppy disks and printed reports storing all of that data and research. But we've moved through technology, going from floppy disks to CD-ROMs to cloud storage for storage alone, and not to mention the other applications that we used at the beginning of the VPC, applications locally on a computer. Going a decade later, the first Venice Project Center website was created, and websites have been updated and created for the Venice Project Center and for its projects since then. And then about a decade later, we start getting into smartphones, smartphone apps for projects, and soon after that, we get web applications. And here you can see a dashboard that was created by an anniversary project that features a bunch of different web apps. Now, the anniversary projects, like ours, happen every 5 years at the Venice Project Center. And these really focus on that research dissemination. And you kind of take a look back at what the Venice Project Center has done so that we can move forward and look to the future for what we can do next. And some of the things that prior teams have created are these web apps and this dashboard that hosts those web apps, websites or updating old websites, and exhibits, like the one that was created a few years ago, the last anniversary. And also we've got videos that have been created. And so our anniversary team is adding a new technology into that, which is called story maps. This is basically an interactive kind of website that uses narrative storytelling combined with data and research to give a really effective presentation of information and research. And we'll be touching more on that later. But each one is focused on one specific topic and gives a lot of information about that specifically.
So getting a bit more into these specific topics, Professor Carrera and the previous summer team worked to determine 11 major topics that are relevant to Venice and Venice Project Center research. Those topics are bridges, islands, canals, docks, boat traffic, moto ondoso, which is the term for the wakes created by that boat traffic, reterra, which are filled in and or covered canals, wellheads, fountains, coats of arms, and bell towers. Now, for each of those topics, we have a few distinct products that we're producing here. So the aforementioned story maps, sections of an exhibit, booklets, videos, and the publication of the data related to each of these topics. And so we're going to start here, handing it off to Nicole to talk a bit more about the first one, story maps.
So in order to create the story maps, we took 10 different topics because there was already one story map created by the team this summer on the topic of bridges. And we took each of these 10 topics and we researched them utilizing past reports, research data, images, and graphics presented in both previous research reports and in Professor Carrera's dissertation. And we combined these into story maps. So you might ask, what is a story map? Well, a story map is an interactive website that incorporates graphics, maps, geographical information systems data, and it is presented in a narrative format so that it tells a story as it progresses along through the topic. And as you can see, these are 9 out of the 10 story maps that we created. The one that you saw on the previous slide was the canal story map, which I'm actually going to take you through right now as a little bit of a virtual tour. So here we have our canal story map. As you can see, this is presented in a narrative format as it utilizes text to tell the story about the canals. There are different slide decks so that you can use pictures to portray your story, and you can go through and it will show different aspects of the photos that you use. And then another cool thing is that you can incorporate different maps into your story map. And also, you can utilize tools previously created by Venice Project Center teams, like this map of the canal hydrodynamics that is shown in real time. This was created by the 25th anniversary team 10 years ago, and it is still pretty relevant to what is done today.
All right, so our second objective would be creating an exhibit. So the original exhibit was created in 2018. It was located in the bell tower. The main concept behind this exhibit was to showcase the many achievements of the VPC, and it was formatted in a way that showed a rise in elevation, meaning that it started with islands being the lowest in elevation, and went all the way up to bells and bell towers being the highest in elevation. So we wanted to focus on three main aspects of this exhibit. Number one being the location. We decided to put this exhibit in the main stairway over there in the VPC so that everyone was able to see it, and it also showed that elevation as well as seeing in the bell tower. We then created a physical format of all of the visual aspects, as you can see in the top right two pictures, so that we could see what worked well and what flowed well. And then from that, we also decided where the topics would go on the stairs. From the organization of the posters, we decided on a display layout. These were the 6 posters created. You can see only 4 right now, but the 2 on the left are the final presentation posters for the canals, and then the ones on the bottom would be used for future teams. Our next thing we focused on was the materials and testing. We wanted to make sure that we hung these posters without making any damage to the walls or the staircase, so we decided on those 3 items on the top left, as well as kept track of the pricing so that we can know how much it would cost for the final project. On the right, you could see an example of us hanging these items with those materials. And then on the middle poster, you could see the final presentation of how the posters would be hung with the materials.
All right, so our next objective that we're going to get into is the booklet. So throughout this term, we've created a booklet specifically on the canals, and we did this through working with the VPC interns to make the layout. We also went out and captured our own photos, and we used graphics from Professor Carrera's dissertation, and we also drafted the text using the text from the story map that was previously shown. So here's a picture of what some of the pages look like. And these booklets are going to eventually be part of a full series. So there will be one of these booklets on each of the 10 topics that we previously mentioned. And the canals booklet that we made this term will be used as a guide for the future teams. So all the booklets will have the same layout, and they'll all include the same features. And they will also look uniform, so they can all be displayed together, like is shown in this picture. And so some of these features that are going to be in all of the booklets and that are in the booklet that we made include the A5 format, which is the landscape format that is shown here. And they're going to have a spine with text, which is also shown. And that means they're required to have at least 80 pages so that they can accommodate for the spine with text. They will also have a photo mosaic cover. They will use the Soto Portego font, which is based off of the stencil that's used on all the signs around Venice, all the street signs, which there's one shown down there. And then there's going to be an about the cover page at the beginning that explains the picture on the front. Just a few more features that they'll have. They will all have a table of contents, a glossary of terms, a bibliography, and they'll have a QR code on the back that has a link to the Venice Project Center website. They'll have a QR code with a link to the Venice Project Center website so that the reader can get additional information about the topic that the booklet is about.
All right, so moving on to the video. So the video itself has its own production workflow that we decided upon as a group with help from Professor Carrera. We're going to get into all of its distinct steps and elements a bit more in depth after this, but just looking at it at large, this takes intro videos which give the background information for story maps. Then we take the content and structure of the story maps, expand upon it into a draft script. Then we use AI narration tools to get a narration of that script. And then we take that, and using additional visual media, we edit together a draft video, which will be used as a template for a final cut. So getting into the intro videos. The intro videos themselves are essentially a video of Professor Carrera providing background information on each topic. So this is general history, importance, related issues, and associated Venice Project Center work to that topic. In order to get this started, we needed to create a recording studio. So with help from a professional videographer, we set up a recording studio in the VPC bell tower. And then we filmed each of these videos for each of the topics, and then explored using speech-to-text tools, specifically within Microsoft Word, to convert these videos into text that could be used for later products down the line. And moving into the draft script and AI narration, again, we used that story map narrative to create a general video structure. We took that video structure and expanded it into a draft script. And now at this point in a normal workflow, you would take this script and go over multiple iterations. And instead, we opted to use AI tools, specifically in this case, the software play.ht, to voice clone and narrate the script to read it for us. So we're going to actually play a little example of this right here.
Hello, I'm Professor Fabio Carrera, Director of the Venice Project Center. For the past 35 years, the Venice Project Center has had the goal of exploring and studying solutions to preserve and improve life in the city of Venice.
All right, and so yeah, believe it or not, that was Professor Carrera's voice, or should I say his AI voice clone. Believe it or not, this was actually created using a free demo version of this software that only took 30 seconds of audio file in order to create this voice clone. So definitely pretty cool stuff. We ended up utilizing this to give us the advantage of having a living, breathing script that we could edit up into the final iteration of our video. Sorry. Moving on to the B-roll and the drafting of the video. So first we went out gathering B-roll media across Venice. For those that don't know what B-roll is, it's a term often used in media production fields. It basically refers to any supplementary media that accompanies the primary footage of the video. So in our case, it's just the media that is playing while the voiceover is being read out. So our B-roll collection progress consisted of us going out across Venice and recording photos and videos of anything relating to those 11 relevant topics. And now bringing us to the next step, which was the actual editing of the draft video. So this took the AI narration that we had and the B-roll that we had collected and any graphics that we had located along the way and put it together for a rough video, which we will show a little snippet of right here.
Individual islands that are broken up by these small waterways called canals, ranging from as large as 4 kilometers to as small as 26 meters in length. Canals come in all shapes and sizes. Actually, in Italian, only the large canals are called canals, such as Canale Grandi and Canale della Giacca, while the rest of the smaller ones are called Rii or Rio in singular. Either way, these canals play an essential role in the commercial, economic, and social success of the city of Venice.
So as you might have seen in that example cut, there was obviously some rough parts, some mispronunciations, some weird inflections. This is a rough version of the video. There are finalized B-roll and graphics that need to be made, and of course the script will be finalized. But this is going to use as a template for future teams to build upon, create a finished, polished product, and also to use as a guide for future videos.
Moving into our final objective we're going to talk about today is the open data aspect of this. So as I talked about at the beginning, the Venice Project Center has open data on its website as part of the data dissemination that it prides itself on. And so we wanted to make even more accessible to everybody. So there is a lot of data that's been collected by the Venice Project Center over the last 35 years, and it's stored in a database which is not really accessible to most people. If you wanted to go and view that data or use it for your own research or project, it would be really difficult. So we made it real easy to do that by linking it to the website using something called an API, which is essentially a computer program that takes the data from the website, switches it around into an easier format for you to use, and then gives it to you on the Venice Project Center website in an easy-to-use way. And here you can see kind of what the database looks like. It's not really easy to access. And now that we're doing all of this data dissemination, we had to kind of ask ourselves, how are people going to find out about the Venice Project Center? So we've got the Venice Project Center website, which has come a long way since it's the first one in 1998. But this is one of the most common ways that people find out about the Venice Project Center. And the other one is social media, which we wanted to put a little bit of help into the Venice Project Center's social media. So we looked into the most effective platforms for the Venice Project Center to use, determining that Facebook would be a really good one, as well as LinkedIn and Instagram. We created the Venice Project Center a LinkedIn account for it to use, especially to connect with alumni of the Project Center, and also help to revitalize its Instagram and Facebook to be used by future project teams and staff at the VPC to reach out to alumni and the Venetian public, who are the ones who are going to be probably interested in this research, as they're the ones who are dealing with the problems that the Venice Project Center is working to solve.
So these are the deliverables that our project has worked to create. We created 10 story maps, 4 draft posters for the exhibit, along with 2 finalized posters as seen here, a booklet on canals, a draft canal video, and we also worked to make the data for the VPC website more accessible and worked to revitalize and improve the VPC social media accounts.
So the hope is that the work that we completed here as a project team will build a foundation and leave a guide for future teams to work on sharing the Venice Project Center's lasting legacy. Thank you. Questions, comments, and concerns?
So, thank you very much for the presentation. I was very intrigued with the AI voice system that you have used. Which company is it?
Yeah, so it was play.ht. This was one that I had found online. I actually weighed a few different options that had free demo versions because we wanted to get an idea of what one was going to work the best before we really made a move. I will say I chose that one, and it had the best results across 3 separate ones.
So
Play.ht, just the 2 letters.
Just to be clear, the final video is not going to be done with AI. This helped us get the timing of how long the videos were going to be and position the graphics in the right places. At the final, the final cut will probably have my actual voice, not the AI. But just to be clear.
It is just the instance of we only have 7 weeks here, and finalizing a script and getting a final recording typically takes probably that long between, working back and forth. So we used it to the best of our ability.
It's very useful to kind of lay out the video in a draft form. Any other question or comment? from anybody, including your fellow students here? Anybody? All right, then I guess we'll move on to the next team. Thank you. So this next team, as they prepare, worked on housing issues in Venice. As I said before, Serendipity's goal is to create jobs by creating startups, by helping startups. But once you create the startups, the next problem is housing, almost right away. And our own employees of Serendipity have problem finding houses. So these guys are going to tell us about a plan that we have to maybe make this possible in the future.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiana Bruce.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Chan.
I'm Spencer Duran.
I'm Divya Kumar. And my name is Felicia Lank. Today, we'd like to introduce you to our interactive qualifying project, Casa Peyote, Housing Strategy to Increase Home Ownership in Venice, Italy.
So, for the past 70 years, Venice has been facing a problem of residential population decline. Back in 1951, they had an historic max of 175,000 residents, and today there's only less than 50,000 remaining, which is a 70% decrease. One of the major factors for the residential decline is tourism and the high levels that Venice faces every year, which directly impacts the job and housing markets. More specifically, the tourism affects low quality of jobs available and a low diversity of jobs. It increases the cost of rentals, and it lowers the number of rentals available for longer term stays. A study done by SmartDesk back in 2019 showed that most local professions are tourist related. For the highest or most common categories they found were tourist services, commerce, transportation, and hospitality. These categories add up to 2/3 of the total job market, and those are all tourist related jobs. Not only are the jobs low in diversity, they also have lower wages. If we look at these salaries in Italy, the national gross average is at 30,000 euros, while tourism and travel average is at 28. So as the wages remain low, rent continues to rise in Venice. This graph is from Immobiliare, an Italian real estate company, and it shows the average rental price per square meter in its recent trends. Using the current 14.82 price per square meter and the average house size of 80 meters, we have a rent for the average house size of 1,200 euros a month. If we look at the average minimum income in Venice, an individual only makes about 1,500 euros a month, which means that rent is becoming very unaffordable for them, and it's even difficult for couples to afford this as well. So residents are also having to share the limited housing available on the market with tourists. Another study by SmartDesk showed that in 2021, there was only a little over 10,000 houses on the market to be rented or sold. Of those 10,000, 1/3 of them were dedicated to long-term rentals, vacation homes, and student housing, while the other 2/3 were dedicated to tourist and short-term rentals.
Housing accommodations specific to tourists in Venice have increased significantly. From 2008 to 2019, the number of beds for those accommodations have increased by 500%, while the population has decreased by 13%. To look at this in another perspective, there are 3 tourist beds for every resident in San Marco, which is the tourist heart of Venice. Airbnb is a popular online platform used to book short-term rentals. It's used widely by tourists and people planning their stays. According to data from inside Airbnb, there are currently 6,500 listings in the historic city, and that map shows the Airbnb listings across the islands and how common it is to have Airbnbs in Venice. So here's a breakdown of the Airbnb listings in Venice. 4/5 of listings are entire homes or apartments, meaning that the entire buildings are unavailable to residents. 2/3 of hosts have multiple listings, meaning that they buy numerous properties with the intention of using them as short-term rentals to generate as much income as possible, which also reduces the availability for the residents. There are more houses for sale than for rent, according to Immobiliare. With the high number of houses for sale, it is more viable for the Venetians to purchase and buy and own a home. But what does that home buying process look like financially?
So let's take a quick look at that. As mentioned, the average house size is about 80 square meters, and with an average price per square meter of 3,000 euros, that equates to an average house price of 240,000 euros for a house. Now, typically, the amount that needs to be paid upfront is about 20% of that, which in this case is 48,000 euros. And if the rest of that is taken out as a loan from the bank, it will cost about 1,300 euros a month over the course of 30 years. Now, using that data and comparing it to the monthly rent as mentioned earlier, they're very similar, meaning that many Venetians who currently are renting could afford a monthly mortgage payment for a house of the same size almost entirely. But if we look at the down payment of those houses, they cost even more than 2 full incomes, so a couple, of their annual salary, meaning that the down payment is really the problem for why many Venetians cannot afford to purchase a home.
So keeping that in mind, we looked into a couple American companies that try to help potential homeowners overcome that initial down payment problem. One such company is Divvy Homes there on the left, which uses a rent-to-buy model where the company fronts the initial down payment and then the resident then pays back the company using their monthly rent until they eventually own their home. Another company is Loftium, which uses a host-to-own model where the company initially fronts the down payment as well, and the resident rents out a room or suite in their home and uses the profit made by that in order to pay the company back. So Casa Peyote is a conceptual startup developed by Serendipity in 2017 and studied by a previous WPI student team. The goal is to leverage the higher earnings from short-term and student rentals to produce more affordable options for homeownership in Venice. Now, why would we use short-term rentals? So short-term rentals actually generate about 3 times the profit of longer-term rentals for the same amount of time, and the flexibility is also another part that makes it good to fit in the student stays. The difference between Casa Peyote and other short-term rental hosts is that instead of the profit going to the individuals, it is then instead going to go back into creating homeownership for Venetians. To break down Casa Peyote's concept, they will initially buy 2 buildings, the first of which will be used to house WPI students and other short-term rentals, while the second one will use a rent-to-buy model to house 1 Venetian and use the other units for short-term rentals as well. That way, over time, Casa Peyote will have enough money to buy future buildings that can then house Venetian residents through the rent-to-buy model as well. The increase of WPI students is also playing a pivotal part in the reintroduction of the Casa Peyote concept from 2017. Before, only 27 students stayed in the city in 1 term, while now, over 3 terms, leave over 60 students staying in Venice. That means that WPI currently pays just under 250,000 euros in order to house all these students. So with that profit going to Casa Peyote, it can start becoming more viable and go from a concept to an actual company.
So now on to our mission. Over the past few months, we have been working to implement Casa Peyote's concept through selecting example buildings, creating renovations, and analyzing financials to determine the viability of the startup. We determined the following objectives to help us best accomplish our mission. First, we identified and visited suitable homes on the Venice market. We then developed a renovation plan for the most viable buildings. And finally, we analyzed the financials for the purchases, renovations, and rentals.
Now let's dive into that first objective, how we decided what buildings were suitable to look at, where we decided on a couple of factors. The two most important ones being that they were independent buildings, meaning it was the full building for sale, not just one or two units within a building, as well as around 300 square meters for our size to look at. So using these parameters, we located and visited 5 different buildings throughout the historic city. And when we went on these site visits, we collected things like pictures, measurements, and all kinds of data to later compare and contrast our buildings. We then looked at the main categories being our listing price, the size of the building, and then the existing floor plans and how easy they were to work with. With all those parameters in mind, we ended up choosing the first and the fourth house we visited, which we'll now call the Madonna House and the La Zare House. So now our second objective, developing a renovation plan. When we thought, hey, we need to renovate these buildings, we came up with a couple of goals in mind to guide our plans. Those being, we wanted to accommodate 24 WPI students, which is how many students visit in a single term. We wanted to make sure to have 1 unit set aside for an initial Venetian resident, and we wanted to maximize the number of units across both spaces. We also took into account things like building code and the minimum square meters for different types of rooms, different layouts, and what is needed to be considered a habitable and a safe unit for a person to live in. Now moving into the renovation of the Madonna House, I'm going to take you step by step on one of the renovations we did for reconfiguring these floor plans. On the left here, we have the before, and on the right, the after. We took this top room and split it into a kitchen, dining, and living room, as well as a bathroom. We took this next room down here and split it into a bedroom that could sleep 3, as well as a hallway. We did the same with the next room, adding a closet in. And this room on the left, we decided to incorporate the existing bathroom from the mezzanine floor by connecting it down to this level and adding another bedroom and closet, making one large unit that could sleep 7 people. We did the same thing for the mezzanine floor, creating a unit that could sleep 5 people while having all our required spaces. And then with our main floor, the first floor, we took these 3 blocks on the left here and split those into 3 separate units, using the 2 pink rooms in the middle as common spaces so that we could cut down on the apartment sizes individually while still having large living spaces that would be perfect for WPI students and short-term rentals to take advantage of.
Moving on to our second house, which is the La Zare House, and I'll take you on these renovations that we did. So here is the ground floor. By adding some walls, we were able to split this up into its own unit, sleeping 1 bed, which can house the 1 initial Venetian. This is level 1, where it can also be its own unit, and it sleeps 5 beds, and by getting some more space on this floor, we're able to create a larger kitchen as well. And similarly, we did the same thing for level 2 with a bigger kitchen and its own unit, and it's sleeping 5 people. And then the same applies for level 3. And to summarize the total renovation results, the Madonna House houses 24 beds across 5 units, which is perfect for the number of WPI students that come to Venice and work on their projects. The La Zare House has 16 beds total across 4 units, and one of them will accommodate the 1 Venetian resident as part of the Casa Peyote model, and the rest of the three units will house short-term rentals. And the total occupancy between the 2 buildings are 40 people total. So after looking at the purchase prices, the listing prices, and our proposed renovations, Casa Peyote needs 2 sources of funding for those purchase and renovation costs. The first one is the bank, who covers a large percent of total purchase and renovation costs, as well as the standard mortgage. The second one is the private investor, who covers the remaining portion with a percentage paid back each year. We as a team created documentation for our houses, also called as dossiers, to propose to to propose a plan to those banks and private investors to acquire those necessary funds for these costs.
So let's take a look at a few pages from the dossiers we created for our 2 selected buildings. Here we have a cover page which just features a picture of the house as well as some basic information, including the commercial area, actual area, year built, and the square footage. Next, we have the location page with a map on how to get there as well as some directions. Then we have pages featuring pictures of the interiors of each house, the current floor plans, as well as our renovation plans. And finally, a financial analysis page that will get into more detail in our next objective.
So looking at those financials, there were a lot of different factors that we need to consider. The first, of course, being purchasing the house and making the building what we envisioned. So in total of those 2 houses, including the renovations, the total cost for Casa Peyote would be about 4.5 million euros. And with the combination of bank and private investment loan, the yearly payment would be around a little bit over 400,000 euros a year. The next cost that needed to be looked at was the operations. And this is things like administration, personnel fees, and utilities that need to, of course, be there for the building. And these came out to a little bit over 100,000 euros a year. Moving on, there are taxes on the income generated by the buildings. There's both a national tax and a Venice-specific one. And in total, it would cost about $57,000 a year, or euros a year. And then finally, there's the revenue made by the buildings. And there are 3 different types that we went over. The rent from WPI students coming to Venice, short-term rentals during the time that WPI students aren't here, and then the Venetian resident who's using that rent-to-buy model. And in total, that would be a little under 700,000 euros a year. And this totals to around 120,000 euros a year, which varies slightly year to year due to varying costs. So the spreadsheet created is flexible and allows Casa Peyote to adjust the loan from the bank and the private investor depending on what they can negotiate. So they can input certain parameters to get a result and understand where they stand. So here's an example of one financial timeline. And one thing to note is on the right side there, for some months, the profit is positive, and for some months it's negative. But in the total cash on hand, the one all the way on the right, it always stays in the positive, meaning that the plan is feasible, as Casa Peyote will always have saved money. So here's that plotted on a graph over time. And you can see the total cash on hand, the change in that over time. And the first jump there at around year 8 is after the Venetian takes out a loan from the bank for the after the rent portion of the rent to buy to then purchase the remainder of their home. And that is where the big jump in cash comes in there. And then the second one is when Casa Peyote pays off their mortgage, and then they no longer need to pay that monthly payment every year.
So over time, Casa Peyote will be able to sell the remaining units in the Lazer house to other Venetians using the same rent-to-buy model. The financial spreadsheet we created can be used to determine the rate at which the units can be sold and still allow Casa Peyote to be affording any remaining mortgage and other costs for the rest of the years. And the goal is that by the end of it, the complete building will be used for Venetian residents.
So finally, Casa Peyote can continue to repeat this process to purchase, restore, and rent out more buildings. And by doing this, it will continue to create more affordable opportunities for home ownership in Venice, Italy. Thank you.
You are a real estate guy. You want to ask any questions or make any comments?
how long must the rent from you, from the students, last in order to be a safe project? Otherwise, it's just a tourist rent agreement.
So I guess the question is, how long will WPI students continue to come to Venice? Is that the question, basically? How long will WPI students continue to come to Venice? In other words, how long will I last? Is that the question? I think there's other universities for one thing. It's not just WPI. So there are plenty of universities, which I guess you guys looked into, right? Somewhat, that come to Venice. Probably more than a dozen that could also be housed. The advantage of WPI is that we have 2-month bimesters instead of 6-month semesters, so it's a little easier to work with our students than with other universities. But yes, that's a good question. It's definitely the number one question the bank will ask. How long before you die, kind of question. Okay. Thank you, Piero. He was the architect that followed this team in every meeting. Gave him all the details to do the calculations. Any other question or comment? Anybody who needs housing?
I do have a question and some comments. I really like the project. I think it's very interesting because I moved to Venice and it was really hard to find apartments. And yes, and the question is it only profitable because you buy those 2 units? Like, could you start smaller with 1 unit, or is it only profitable because you have to buy those 2 at one go? And then how long until the renovation is done so people can actually move in? Because I know that the renovation in Venice costs like 3 times more than the mainland. So, like, is that anything in calculation?
So 2 questions. Did you get them? Do we need both buildings? Question number 1.
Yes, so we don't necessarily need 2 buildings, but having both of them helps us achieve both goals of housing all of the WPI students and beginning to have a rent-to-buy model for an actual resident. Yes.
Yes. So we did the math, and 2 buildings actually begin to show that residents can live there. Otherwise, it just looks like a tourism sort of speculation. The second question was how long will it take before the restorations are done? The numbers took into account the costs. That was what part of your question. The other question was how long will they take? Maybe we should let the architect answer. From the moment you buy it.
Depends on the state of the building when you start the renovation. And by the way, those 2 are from scratch, basically. So it takes 6-7 months.
Timing is very important because we have students that keep coming. They come in this time of the year, and they come in March, April, and May, June for us. So the timing is mostly because of the approvals, really, because certain things take a month usually just to get the checkbox. Any other question or comment from anybody? No? All right, guys, thank you very much. We really fully intend to do this, actually, and so, we'll see. Now we just have to literally go after the funding for it. Our goal is to get it going before next fall, within a year from today. Okay, now, while this team sets itself up, this team studied the new Venetians, people who have moved into Venice, and they'll tell you all about what they found with their research.
Hello, everyone. We are another group of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and we worked on people who are moving into Venice. So we found the motivations to move to Venice for expatriates, remote workers, returnees, and retirees. I'm Olivia, and I worked with Nithya, Joey, and John on this project.
Okay, so Venice is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, so much so that UNESCO has actually added it to its list of World Heritage Sites. Additionally, the city also has a long history and a rich culture, as the beautiful architecture of San Marco and the unique glasswork of Murano have attracted millions of people to the city. Unfortunately, though, Venice has been facing a steady depopulation since the end of World War II, and in 2023, it has only about a quarter of the population that it did in 1945. Luckily, however, there are plenty of groups of people moving into the city. The 5 largest of these groups are Chinese, Ukrainian, Romanian, Filipino, and French. This data shows us that Venice can attract people from all over the world, and our project hopes to strengthen this ability.
So the goal for our project is to understand the factors that allow people to settle in Venice by exploring the experiences of expatriates, remote workers, returnees, and retirees. Now, what are those groups of people? Expatriates, or expats for short, are individuals that are not originally from Venice, but have decided to move into the city for long-term settlement. These individuals can be from other places in Europe, other places in Italy, anywhere in the world, but the main important thing is that they were not originally from Venice and then decided to move into the city for long-term settlement. Remote workers are individuals with a job that allows them to work remotely, so it doesn't really matter where they live. They can live wherever they want in order to complete their work, but they decided to come to Venice to complete their remote work. Returnees are individuals that were born in Venice and then left for a period of time to settle abroad, and then decided to come back into Venice and settle abroad and settle permanently again. So the important thing with them is that they were born in Venice, born and raised, decided to leave Venice for a set amount of time, and then decided to come back and settle permanently. And finally, retirees can be any one of the groups mentioned before, but they are no longer working, i.e. they are retired and decided to live in Venice for the rest of their retirement. So in order to complete our project, our objectives were to explore the factors that attract people to settle into the historic city of Venice. We wanted to investigate the factors that influence people to stay in Venice, and we wanted to identify challenges that people face while living in Venice that might drive them out of the city later. So we wanted to explore what brings people into the city, what requires them to stay, what allows them to stay, and then what might drive them away in the future. To do that, we conducted various semi-structured interviews with Venetian residents. We talked about topics regarding life in Venice, relationship status, work, culture, and any challenges that they faced while living in Venice. Now, this project is a continuation from another team that took place over the summer of 2023, and they provided us with a few very important assets that allowed us to complete our project. First off, they gave us some contact information for Venetian residents that might be interested in an interview, so we were able to reach out using their contact information. They also gave us a suggested questionnaire of topics that they think we should talk about. We did take this questionnaire and we did expand it and we transformed it into something that we think we will use and topics that we wanted to cover that might be important. And they also gave us some preliminary research data of interviews that they were able to complete so that we can add our data to. So all data that we talked about tonight is a combination between the data that was gathered in the summer of 2023 and then our data that we gathered over the past 2 months. With all that being said, here is our results.
So as Joey said, we are working with the interviews that they conducted over the summer, which was 38 interviews. And over the past 2 months, we've been able to complete 62 interviews. So all of our data that we're looking at is about 100 total interviewees. We tried to get an even split of gender identity, and we were able to do so. We got about 43 male and 57% female. This is good, so we get both perspectives on the issues. And as you can see, we mainly interviewed expatriates. This is for two reasons. One, expatriates were easier to find. Remote workers can kind of work anywhere, so they were difficult to find. And also returnees. Turns out a lot of people do not come back to the city. And secondly, the summer team primarily focused on expatriates, so their research really only talked about them. And just to jump into our interviewees' jobs, 21% of our interviewees were teachers, and this includes like secondary school or professors at the universities here. The second largest group was service workers, and it's also important to note that we did go out to some of the shops around Venice and tried to interview the shop owners, and a lot of them lived in Mestre, and so we weren't able to include them in our data. This will be mentioned later with some of the housing and expenses issues. But service is a big thing here because of all of the tourism. And our third biggest group was art, which makes sense because Venice is a beautiful place full of wonderful culture and art. And as far as jobs for remote workers go, 29% of them were in business. We interviewed some business owners, so they were able to work anywhere they wanted because they were their own boss. The second biggest was art. Again, Venice is a wonderful hub for art. And the third biggest was technology. Obviously, if you work in technology, you can work anywhere you want. And as far as where our interviewees were from, as we know, 12% of them were returnees, so they're originally from Venice, so they are Italian. And then that other 35% are people outside of Venice that we considered expats. As Joey said, anyone from Italy who's not originally from Venice would be considered an expatriate. And our other big groups were people from the United States of America, England, and France. And we also tried to get an even distribution of age to get multiple different opinions. And as you can see, people mostly move into Venice when they're about 20 or 30. And unfortunately, Venice is aging. Most of our interviewees were 60 plus. So that's part of the issue with the depopulation, is that people are getting older and we need more people, new people to come in at a younger age to fill that gap.
After analyzing the data gathered from our interviews, we identified four main factors that attracted people to move into the historic city of Venice. The first one, the primary factor bringing people to Venice, was work. Individuals relocated after finding an in-person permanent job position. In addition to in-person jobs, remote work opportunities also served as an attractive factor. A notable example was an interviewee from Paris who successfully transitioned into a digital nomad lifestyle through a specialized program, marking a significant turning point in her life. The second factor was the pursuit of higher education. Several individuals highlighted the esteemed universities in Venice, particularly noting their excellence in fields such as economics and architecture. The third factor was relationships. Individuals, particularly returnees, decided to come back in order to rejoin their families, while others came back for love, opting to be closer to their significant others based in Venice rather than maintaining a long-distance relationship. The final factor was choice. Venice is beautiful and it offers a very unique lifestyle, attracting several individuals to come in and experience it. We observed that among those who came in by choice, they had a deep sentimental connection with the city, rooted in either a previous visit that led to a profound love for Venice or familial ties, such as one interviewee who had a connection with Venice because of his mom who grew up in Croatia, which is close to Venice, and he described the city being at the center of his heart.
So through our interviews and the coding of the transcripts that resulted, we were able to identify the main factors as to why people chose to stay permanently in Venice. So the most important of these factors was lifestyle. And the interviews cited walkability and the not having to worry about the cost of owning a car as major factors that they appreciated. And one of our interviewees also said that she appreciates that since there are no cars, she doesn't have to worry about getting into an accident or getting hit. The second most important one was friends and family. So we were often told that having a relative who had lived here prior to them coming, or their spouse who they met when they first arrived, played a significant role in making them want to stay permanently in the city. Additionally, parents said that they appreciate being able to let their kids walk to school on their own, because they trust that Venice is a safe and tight-knit community. And I think a quote that exemplifies how Venice is a tight-knit community is the following: "You have a kind of relation person to person which you don't have anywhere else." And then the next most important factor was work. So we found that although some people struggled with finding a job in Venice, we found that once they were able to secure a job, they were much more likely to stay. And here's a quote from an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist we interviewed, and she said, "I began to work in the hospital in Venice. It's wonderful. I think it's one of the most beautiful hospitals in the world." And then the final most important factor was culture and beauty. And this makes sense since UNESCO added it onto their list of World Heritage Sites. So it makes sense that people would want to stay for the culture and the beauty of Venice. And this quote says, "Everywhere in Venice is like an open museum. There's so much to discover."
And next, we're going to get into some of the challenges that people face. So unfortunately, the biggest problem that people cited was the mass tourism in Venice, specifically the fact that the Venice is governed by touristic demand and it's in competition with the needs of the residents. And part of this is tied into the politics. Some of our interviewees felt like the government should be doing more to help Venetian residents. That's not currently being done. So 61% of our interviewees say that tourism is an issue in the city. And it's not going to change if the politics don't change. The specific interviewee said many things have to change together or else we will be staying in a sinking city. And sinking city, obviously we all know there's problems with the water, but she also meant in an economic sense. And one of the questions that we specifically, just the fall team, did was asking if they felt any changes in the city. So this data is based just on our 62 interviews that we did this fall. The biggest category of changes is they see that there's more tourists. Obviously, we can see this in data and in numbers, but people also felt it like walking around the city. They said it was harder to walk around, that the tourists used to only come in the summer, and now they're here all year long. I'm going to skip down to the third one, less residents. Obviously, we've seen that with our graphs, but also people said they felt like their friends were moving away, their family was moving away because they weren't able to live in Venice anymore, which is sad. And then I'm going to jump back to the shops. 27% of our fall interviewees noticed a change in the shops. And this is a change from having butchers and hardware stores to more shops for tourists, things like the masks and Murano glass. And anyone who walks around Venice can see that there are so many of these shops. And specifically, one person we interviewed cited that she wasn't able to find something as simple as a button on the island. She had to go either to Mestre or order it online. And when you take these shops away from the residents, it makes it much, much harder to live here. Nextly, 11% noted that the housing issues have increased, as we learned from Casa Piota. Obviously, there are housing issues in Venice because of the Airbnbs and so many short-term rentals because of the tourists. But this person noted that finding a house is getting even harder and the cost of buying one is getting very, very high. And lastly, 5% of our interviewees feel that Venice is becoming less safe. This is a small percent, but as we noted in our reasons people stay, safety is one of the reasons people enjoy Venice so much. People are able to send their fourth grader to just go walk to school and they don't have to take them. And because there's no cars, it's a very safe place to raise kids, which a lot of our interviewees are doing. And so this specific woman said the city was safer. She wasn't afraid to walk alone in the city after 3 p.m., and now she would be afraid to let her children outside past 11 p.m. And as I mentioned earlier, housing and the expenses of living in Venice was another big challenge that people faced. They say it's impossible to rent here. She's a 30-year-old woman just trying to do 30-year-old things, and she's unable to afford them, and it's just very, very difficult. Specifically, Italians think Venice is expensive. Again, I said 47 of our interviewees were Italian, and when they are comparing it to other places in Italy, it seems very expensive. One person specifically saying it's absolutely absurd the amount of money for rent combined with groceries, and it's very expensive, especially when people are comparing it to the mainland. But when we look at foreigners' data, they don't tend to think it's as expensive. Specifically Europeans, the majority of them actually think it's not expensive. This makes a lot of sense because a lot of our Europeans were from either England or France. And when you look at cities like Paris and London compared to Venice, they are much more expensive. In fact, one of our interviewees used to live in Paris and moved to Venice because it was so much more affordable. And when you look at North America, which includes interviewees from the United States and Canada, they're a little more split, with 59% thinking it's expensive. And then also something to note is the teachers here think it's very expensive. We noticed reasons people stay and people come here is because of studying. And unfortunately, this person did not think that teachers in Italy are paid very well, and so it is very expensive to live here on her salary. But we do need teachers to help our universities and schools. And like I said, 21% of our interviewees were teachers, so it's a very popular job here. And 78% of those teachers thought that Venice was expensive.
Another one of the main challenges that interviews cited as a challenge living in Venice is a category that we are calling social barrier. Social barrier has to do with how an individual is able to acclimate to life in Venice, in the social scene, whether they feel accepted by other Venetian residents, whether they would consider themselves Venetian, and other things related to that. So of the people that we interviewed, 90% said that they felt accepted while living in Venice, which is an amazing thing. They cited that Venetians are super open, super welcome, super able, wanting to talk with them, and other things like that. This interviewer said that she absolutely feels accepted, which is a great thing to see. However, only half would consider themselves Venetian. This comes from an idea that we heard talked about a lot during our interviews, which is that Venetian culture, for people that are born in Venice, can oftentimes be very isolated and very protective. And this is because of the high amounts of tourism within the city, wanting to protect their city and wanting to protect their culture from high amounts of tourism and the degradation of their culture. This interviewer said that Venetians are really proud to be born here, and they have a different kind of relationship with the city, with the water, with how things move, and the way of life in Venice. On that note, many people have different definitions of what it means to be Venetian. One interviewer said that living, working, and loving the city, that is what makes someone Venetian. They don't have to be born here, but as long as they work, they love living here, they love the culture, they embrace themselves, then those are Venetians in her mind. There's another camp of people that say that there are few very real Venetians that are left in the city. Many people live here, but they're not from Venice. Being born in Venice and growing up in the culture gives you an appreciation for the location around you, an appreciation for the architecture, the buildings, the way of life. Those are Venetians in her mind. Another challenge that individuals cited is transportation and accessibility, or the idea of moving yourself and moving things around Venice, which oftentimes can be very difficult. As, of course, Venice is a very unique city within the world, Europe especially, most of the city being on water and having to do with a lot of walking, moving large items such as furniture, or if you're doing renovations in your house, can be particularly difficult, having to move large-scale things through narrow alleyways or on and off boats, things like that. And individuals that have any sort of accessibility need or any mobility aids cite that it is very difficult, almost impossible to move around. One of the people that we interviewed cited that when she broke her ankle, it was almost impossible for her to move around the city. One of the final challenges that individuals cited facing was finding a job, as we mentioned before. If this interviewer found a proper job related to their studies, of course they were willing to stay. But if they couldn't, they would absolutely need to move. This comes back to a topic that we said earlier, with a lot of the job market being dedicated solely to tourism. If you are an individual that does not want to work in that type of field, it can be very hard to find a sustainable and well-paying job for you here. And if you cannot find a sustainable and well-paying job, then you will have to leave and go other places to find that. In fact, 47% of the 20-year-olds that we interviewed do not know if they plan on staying, which is very important for us because, as we said before, the 20 and 30-year-old mark was a lot of the groups of people that were coming in and moving into Venice. These individuals cite few job opportunities outside of tourism, dwindling resources for residents, and they wanted to discover other places where they can hopefully be as successful.
Despite these challenges, 73% of our interviewees stated that they plan on staying in Venice. One of our interviewees perfectly captured this sentiment by saying, "One has to make some compromises, but living in Venice is rewarding." This perspective suggests the positive and resilient outlook on those who have chosen Venice as their residence, acknowledging the difficulties, but having a deeper sense of fulfillment that outweighs the challenges. Going back to the graph on our initial slide, how can we create this rebound? How can we reverse the trend and repopulate the city? To facilitate the process, there are two main components: to retain current residents and to attract more expats, returnees, and remote workers. Our project findings highlighted that work was the primary motivator for people to move into Venice. Therefore, the most effective solution would be to improve the city's work infrastructure. This would involve encouraging the development of more startups. Our partnering organization, Serendipity, is committed to producing high-quality jobs in the historic city by promoting startups and providing entrepreneurial support. Other methods to further improve the city's work infrastructure are to expand the diversity of non-extractive jobs, provide more remote work opportunities, develop co-working spaces, and to promote initiatives that support creative communities. These solutions are consistent with the framework and conclusions of Smart Desk, an EU-funded research project whose mission is to help combat issues that arise with tourism-related mobilities as part of their Venice case study. We hope that in the future, after the implementation of these initiatives and solutions, we can change the saying that Venice is beautiful, but I'd never lived there, to Venice is beautiful, and I live here. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Questions or comments? There are several of you who were interviewed as part of this project. Any comments from you guys?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My one question is, have you had any interaction or talk with institutions, with the comune, with local governments, local politicians about these topics? And what do you generally feel is their attitude in relation to this kind of issue?
So we haven't been in contact with them. That was going to be one of our recommendations at the end of our paper. It does seem from how our interviewees felt that the government does not react well, but we haven't personally reached out to them yet. But we do recommend that groups in the future reach out.
Just 1 second, just to clarify, this is the tail end of a long-term project that went on for 3 years, the Smart Desk project. It was a EU Horizon project, where we did interact with the local authorities because we can speak Italian. These guys unfortunately don't speak Italian, so that was a little more complicated.
This was very beautiful, and I liked it a lot, and I appreciate it a lot. I think it's nice and professional. I have only one remark. One thing I think you missed in the end, among the things that needs to be done to keep the people staying in Venice. The most important comment that you had before about the challenges of being in Venice was that rents are too high and that life is expensive. Now, I think this should have been also your first point in what to do to attract the people to live in Venice. And the first thing is to abolish tourist locations. I'm sure somebody must have mentioned this, because tourist locations are the ones that make it impossible for Venetians to stay or to come to live here. So tourist locations and the cost of living, those are, I think, perhaps it should have been emphasized a little more.
You missed the previous presentation because you came in only at right now. The previous presentation was all about housing and tourist locations. So it will be on the video. We're recording everything, so you can watch it on our YouTube channel after the fact. Umberto?
The short question, it's about the methodology you adopted to analyze the interviews. Did you keep them separated? Did you transcribe them? Did you use any tool to analyze the content of the interviews you conducted?
Do you want to talk about it?
So for whenever we did our interviews, we made sure to record the audio of them so that we also had one of us would be taking notes while the other was asking questions. So we always had one person taking notes, and then we recorded the audio. With that audio, we ran it through a speech-to-text generative AI in order to gather a workable text file for any comments that we may have missed while writing it down. That transcription service was called Nota.ai, N-O-T-T-A.ai. We found it was very useful. It was a very useful tool for analyzing our data and our information and making sure that if we missed anything, we can always go back, find a lot of the quotes that we mentioned here, word for word, exactly what they said, to really help us analyze our data.
The e-term or the summer group had a coding system that they used at the end of theirs. So we started with that and tried to build on their codes of like community lifestyle when we picked up on those things in interviews.
So we also had the assistance of Irene Pinto, who was a PhD student in the field of tourism, who also helped them with more technical, coding issues of how to make everything, organize everything into categories and so forth. So thank you, Irene and Tonino.
Thank you.
Just a brief question from retired men. A Venetian repatriate after 40 years more or less abroad. We are all bound to die, we old ones, so there is no much use in interviewing us. But the main issue is, what do you think, you personally, of living in Venice, staying in Venice? Which kind of work, which kind of activity you would plan, and would you like to stay here? Because the young ones are the ones who make the story.
Okay.
I have to say, Tonino is a returnee. He lived in South America you lived in South America for many years, going back and forth, Europe, so he's one of those. Next time we'll interview him. Go ahead and answer, go ahead.
I think Venice is a beautiful place, and I would love to stay here. Unfortunately, we did interview like a couple engineers, and they had to look outside of Venice for work. And because we are all getting engineering degrees, the main thing we found was that it was hard to find a job here. So that would be my main concern. But if I were able to find a job here, I think this is a beautiful place that I will definitely keep in mind for the future.
He's an engineer. I'm an engineer. Maybe you should get my job. Any other question or comment from anybody? Before we move to the spritz time, and so thank you very much.
All right, hello everyone. As previously mentioned, we are a group of undergraduate students from WPI located in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we worked with Rehub addressing glass waste in Venice. I'm Thomas Boyle.
I'm Joseph Cardarelli.
I'm Lexi Joseph.
And I'm Matt Winchell. Now, glass waste is a worldwide problem. When we look at glass production as a whole, Europe is the world's largest glass producer, with roughly 1/3 of the market share being produced here in Europe. When we look at glass waste produced in each country, Europe produces over 8 million metric tons per year, and Italy contributes to 235,000 metric tons of that 8 million.
Rehub is addressing this problem. They're a startup company based in Murano, created by Matteo Silverio, and their mission is to merge tradition and handcraft with innovation and design, striving for a zero-waste society. And they've won many awards for their work, including some from MIT DesignX, the Corning Museum of Glass, and the Wadsworth Atheneum. They have a very unique process to upcycle glass that is formerly non-recyclable. They take that glass waste and they grind it down into a powder, and then they mix it with their proprietary binding agent to create the paste that you can see on screen here. They can then use this paste in manufacturing processes such as 3D printing, injection molding, and rolling to create brand new products like the one you can see on screen. But Rehub wants to scale up. Currently, they're only grinding 200 kilograms of glass waste per week. Their goal is to process 500 kilograms of glass waste per hour, as that is the amount that an industrial glass producer can create in that amount of time.
This brings us to our team's mission, which is to assist Rehub in industrializing the process of turning glass waste into a reusable paste in a sustainable and scalable way. Rehub has created a unique 5-step process to achieve this, beginning first with the glass input. Glass is inputted into the machine, where it is then ground down through 2 cycles into 2 consistencies of glass powder, a coarse powder and a fine powder. These are then transferred over to the mixing stage, where the 2 powders are mixed in proper ratios with certain binding agents, which then produce the proprietary paste. The proprietary paste is then brought to the paste output, where it is compressed of excess air and able to be manually collected for manufacturing use.
If we visually go over the process again, we start with the overall machine package. We first start with the glass input stage. So the glass gets input into the grinder. The grinder then grinds the glass into 2 different consistencies that, when combined in different ratios, can create a unique appearance in the product. It then can be divided up into their own storage containers. It then gets transferred into the mixer. The mixer mixes it with proprietary chemicals and then gets compressed and output from the machine. So we have some overall machine requirements that we need to meet. The first requirement is a 500 kilogram per hour throughput. The next requirement is to package the machine in a standard shipping container. The next requirement is have little to no human interaction. And then we need to be able to control the glass particle ratios to create this unique appearance. So if we look at some images, the image to the left shows some coarse glass powder, and then the image to the right shows some fine glass powder. When you combine these in different ratios, you can create a unique product shown here and what Lexi just showed. So if we go into the specifics of the machine, again, we're starting with the glass input stage. Firstly, it needs to support glass waste as large as 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters, and then we needed to decide between a manual input versus an automatic input. So the team decided on a hopper as the most appropriate option. It can, in fact, support the glass waste input and throughput, and you can ask for the specifications from the manufacturer alongside the grinder. The next phase is the grinder itself. So the grinder needs to be able to grind glass at 500 kilograms per hour, and it needs to grind that glass anywhere between 0.1 millimeters and 1 to 10 millimeters. And lastly, it needs to be below $30,000 USD. So the team decided on the Chima PD1 grinder. It can in fact process glass at 500 kilograms per hour, and it can grind that anywhere between 0.1 to 5 millimeters. It can do 2 different cycle times to acquire those 2 different particle sizes, as I mentioned. And these are the dimensions shown here. The 1500 millimeter dimension includes Chima's hopper, as I mentioned previously. And the overall cost is 27,000 euro.
The next thing we needed to develop was the transfer system. So it needed to separate the 2 particle sizes, the fine and the coarse glass, into their own storage systems. Each storage container needed to have enough overhead storage between the grinder and the mixer to allow for downtime in either process, and it needed to be able to support that 500 kilogram per hour throughput that the grinder is producing. It also needed a very controllable output into the mixer to really fine-tune the ratios of the fine to coarse glass to get a controllable look of the final paste product. This is the design that we came up with. It uses a simple diverter shown in gold on screen that separates the material sizes by blocking off the left or the right side, sorting the proper material into their storage containers, which you can see in pink. Those storage containers hold roughly twice the capacity of the mixer, allowing for plenty of overhead between the 2 processes. Shown in purple here is the transfer system that we designed based off of the Archimedes screw to transfer the material into the mixer. It supports very large throughputs, meeting the 500 kilogram per hour throughput of the mixer, or of the grinder, and it has a very controllable transfer rate. You can determine exactly how much material is input into the mixer by controlling the number of rotations that the screw makes.
In the second to last step in our modular process, the mixing stage, we were tasked with identifying a mixer that is able to match the grinder output. This mixer also needed to be able to have a binder and a colorant input to control the final paste consistency, as well as sensors that can monitor when the final paste is completed. We also needed some way that the mixing process could move the final paste into the output process. We decided that the best way to do this was to design our own paddle mixer using different aspects from various industrial mixers that we identified. So as shown in red, that is our design. It is able to mix 100 kilograms of paste at a time. It has 3 different sensors, a moisture sensor, a torque sensor, and a pressure sensor to monitor the final paste, and it has input for the binding agent as well as different colorants.
The final section of the machine that we designed was the paste output, which had various requirements that we had to include. The first being maintaining a consistent paste quality throughout the process. It had to match the actual mixer throughput, as well as include a compressing mechanism to reduce excess air out of the paste. We designed different aspects of a pug mill into our own design, which allows excess air to be compressed out of a material. We use this aspect to compress the paste, and then the brown screw showed on screen is what drives the paste through an increasingly small diameter to compress the paste where it can be manually collected at the end of the machine for manufacturing processes.
This is our final preliminary design model of the machine. As you can see, the dimensions are shown here, and then we have a 6-foot tall worker for scale. So if the machine did in fact meet the 500 kilogram per hour throughput, it can in fact control these different particle sizes to create this unique paste appearance and therefore a unique product appearance. And we recommend that the sponsor uses this as a preliminary design to inform his future designs. And lastly, we can fit roughly 4 machines in a standard shipping container. We chose a shipping container because they're easy to transport, and as shown here, you can ship them in bulk, which will be cheaper.
The team also developed a simple mock user interface to control the machine. On screen, you can see that it has controls for both the grinder and mixer, as well as sliders to control the ratios of the fine to coarse powder, as well as controlling the ratio of the binder and the glass itself. There are also sliders to control the amount of colorants added to the mixer. As well, in the bottom right corner, you can see an emergency stop button, which is always visible on screen in case anything happens. Shown here is an example of what the screen might look like with some of the sliders configured, as well as some of the switches flipped. In the top right of the screen, you can see a little white button. Tapping that or clicking on that will open up a side menu where you can see sensor information, allowing you to easily determine when the paste is finally finished. As well, you can see a model of the machine, which in this example here, you can see turns green if the machine is running to denote how it's working.
Now that we have discussed how we will produce the paste, the team also researched 4 potential paste applications, which include pieces in the art industry, different fashion items, tiles, and countertops. The first industry that we researched was the art industry. Early Rehub products included 3D printed baskets, wire racks, bowls, vases, and other various decor items. As shown in the pictures, these processes begin by the paste being 3D printed and then heated to shape the desired bowl at the bottom of the screen. These products are great for marketing and promotion and is what Rehub currently uses the paste for in its early stage. However, the team notes that art material sales can fluctuate, and marketing and distributing the paste to artists could be difficult. Therefore, we suggest it is not the most reliable market to solely dedicate its paste to. The team also researched items in the fashion industry. It is a $341 billion industry worldwide. However, it is important to note that glass products contribute to at most 20% of this number. This is because gemstones and precious metals are already considered in the worldwide industry value. Ceramic, porcelain, and glass are the common materials used within this industry, as seen in the 3 pictures to the right of the screen. We researched the cost and manufacturing techniques of common jewelry and fashion materials, including glass rods, glass sheets, ceramic paste, and compared this to the Rehub paste. While the Rehub paste is slightly higher in the average cost per kilogram, It is important to note that the hidden costs compared to the other ones are much lower, as you can use 3D printing and injection molding with the Rehub paste, whereas the others require human labor to handcraft the materials. It is important to note that the amount of paste used for each unit would be rather low in this industry as you're making small products. Therefore, it creates a lower market demand compared to some of the other industries we researched. Therefore, we suggest that Rehub explore other opportunities where it could produce the paste products in bulk.
The next industry that we researched was the tiling industry. This is a $227 billion industry worldwide. And as you can see on the images to the right, these are some early examples of Rehub's products. We researched the average production cost, maintenance, and the manufacturing process for other popular tile materials, such as ceramic, porcelain, and 3 different types of glass: sintered, cast, and float glass. As you can see on the chart to the right, the cost for Rehub paste is very similar to other types of glass, as well as the manufacturing process. However, we did note that with the grout and adhesives that need to be used in the tiling process, there's a severe lack of upcycling for the Rehub paste application. In order for us to align with our sponsor's mission more, we decided that this was not the best for the Rehub paste in order for the Rehub paste to be upcycled in the future. The final industry that we researched was the countertop and tabletop industry. This industry is a $131 billion industry worldwide, and within this industry, recycled glass countertops are a steadily growing market. We researched similar common countertop materials, and we researched the cost per square feet for both the producer and the consumer, as well as the required maintenance and the manufacturing technique. As you can see, since the Rehub paste is made from recycled materials, the production cost is much lower than the rest of the materials, and the manufacturing process is very similar to quartz and stoneware. This led to our decision. Rehub paste production as well is estimated to decrease with higher demand, which makes the consumer cost lower. We decided that this makes countertops and tabletops the most viable market for the Rehub paste application. And as you can see on this image, Rehub is exploring this industry with smaller scale tabletops.
So let's take a look a little bit with the environmental impacts of what we've done. So each year in Murano, over 1,000 metric tons of glass waste are produced. However, with just one machine running for 40 hours per week, we can process that 1,000 metric tons of glass waste each year. So on that scale, just one machine can cover all of the glass waste in Murano every year. And if we expand just a bit further, with 235 machines, we can cover all of the glass waste produced in Italy every year. So with that, we are very hopeful that our work can have a great environmental impact on this glass waste issue. Thank you all very much for listening.
The team will be happy to answer any questions at this time, and we will also pass around some of the samples for everyone to see.
Anybody have any questions or comments before I pass the microphone to Matteo to hear what he thinks? Anybody else? Some of the other startups there in the crowd here? This is the kind of thing that students could do for your startup next year. Not necessarily an industrial thing, but. You guys have a question? Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very inspiring as a solution. I think the owner, you run the company, isn't it? So I want to ask, like, is it already in production and you have the machine ready, or?
Sorry if the echo. I love this place. I love this place. You have to read the book. But I have the machine, right? Well, not this one. Thanks, guy, by the way. Really thank you. We have now, the process is the same, okay? We are running the process using different machines. The limit today is that every step we perform, we need human labor, which is not a problem by itself, of course, but it's not safe, it's costly, and it takes time. That's why we we basically set up this challenge to the students, say, okay, guys, can we do something automatic? And that's why basically today we cannot go higher than 200 kilo per week. It's a bit more, in fact, but more or less that is the average. Okay, with this machine, we can make way higher volume we can process. Sì. Since I have here, no, I will really thank the guys, the students, because they've been really constant. And I don't know how to say in English when you devoti alla causa. Dedicated. Okay. In Italy we say that you are, I mean, siete stati colti da grande forza e spirito di abnegazione, which is an old-fashioned way of saying that, but if some policeman, someone die while they're working, okay, and it's commemoration, they write spirito di abnegazione. It's the higher good thing they can say, okay. Luckily you are here. No, they are really good and they are constant. We have constant meetings till almost the end, because of me, not there. And they've been good interaction, which is, I mean, at the base of a good teamwork. And I'm just happy, and I would again to say thank you. They deserve a good grade. I mean.
I only have a question. If you calculate energy balance of this process, of this system.
So
sorry, the question.
It's okay. We were looking into doing this, but it was a little hard to determine because a lot of stuff is still unknown about like the heating and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of like too much uncertainty in what we were able to calculate with the energy cost.
We made internally at the lab some researchers, and basically processing 1 kilo of glass with this process compared to, I mean, a normal glass manufacturing process, you can save up to 70% of the energy. Why? Because this is a process on demand, while usually a glass furnace needs gas 24/7, and also because we are using electricity and not gas.
All right, well, these guys set up. Let me just say to future startups that might want to work with WPI students, the process lasts 14 weeks. They spend 7 weeks here in Venice, but they also spend 7 weeks before on campus communicating with you to plan the project before they actually come to Venice. So it's a 14-week process. The early stages is just a few Zoom calls, but when they come here, they're working full time, and you just the trick is to be able to guide them, because there's 4 or 5 of them, and they have nothing else going on, so they're really fast workers. All right, so you guys get to use this.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are the WPI team working with 2Gift to support social projects through shopping. I'm Allison. This is Anne. That's Liz. That's Connor, and that's Jack. So 2Gift is a startup company that facilitates funding for nonprofits through the use of gift cards. They're based in Padua, and they actually participated in the MIT Design X Venice in 2022. And because they're a startup company, they aim to expand their customer outreach. So how do donors use 2Gift to support their nonprofits? Donors will first buy a gift card from TwoGift to a shop of their choosing. Then they will select a nonprofit that they want to send a portion of that purchase to. And then finally, donors will be able to support their social projects by shopping at those businesses with no added spending. So as I mentioned earlier, our project aims to help TwoGift in expanding their customer outreach, and we did that through three objectives. The first one being analyzing past campaigns and business models, then identifying enhancements to improve TwoGift, and then finally developing a plan to better reach consumers. And now Liz will take it away with the first one.
Thanks, Allison. So understanding the old business model, it was a one-to-one pairing with a nonprofit and a business, and the businesses provided the gift cards upfront for TwoGift to sell to the nonprofit donors. Looking at the history of TwoGift, TwoGift has completed 7 campaigns over the course of their history, and we will go into their campaign with Venice Cause and Naturacy. So Venice Cause is a nonprofit dedicated to developing an active and supportive community for Venice. They participate in projects for the sustainable development of Venice. In this picture, you can see they're cleaning up the beach. In the TwoGift campaign, TwoGift raised 1,340 euros, had an average donation of 48 euros for the 28 donors that participated. TwoGift's funding raised 30% of the funding in the campaign. So each campaign has a varying amount of donors, donations, and length that they were ran. So for one specific campaign, the Fondazione Fontana campaign, they raised 1,950 euros, had 62 donors, and it was ran for 1 month. Each campaign has a varying amount of donors, length, and amount raised. So in total, TwoGift has raised 10,530 euros across their campaigns and had a reach of 265 donors. If we look at their averages per campaign per month, the average donation was 171 euros, and their average donor reach was 25 donors per campaign per month. These numbers can be used in future assessments to determine growth in the business.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, the old business model partnered one nonprofit with one business, and in this business model, the business would provide the upfront cost of all the gift cards. So something challenging about this is they have to find businesses that are willing to provide that upfront cost, and that can be very challenging. And additionally, donors only had one option to shop at. So in this one, it was the Naturacy. So when TwoGift decided to alter their business model, they decided to do many nonprofits partnered with many businesses. And this many-to-many model that fixes the finding businesses to provide that large upfront cost, and also donors now have more store options to choose from.
We interviewed 3 of these nonprofits from their past business model and how those campaigns went. So we started by asking them questions like, how was their experience with TwoGift? What could improve? What could be better? And they told us that they felt as though they were advertising for the store instead of their nonprofit. They felt that donors needed a better explanation of how TwoGift worked, and they needed more options for their gift cards and more stores to shop at. From that, we introduced the new business model and asked if this would work better for them. They told us that they would be happy that the nonprofits could have longer campaigns to run, the donors would have more store options to shop at, but they would want to be able to filter through which businesses they partnered with so that their missions aligned with those businesses. That takes us to our second objective, identifying enhancements to improve TwoGift.
So to do this, we started off with a survey to 64 participants. We wanted to figure out how donor habits aligned with TwoGift. So we found out that most donors are unaware of how their donations are used after the fundraiser. 59% of the people who donate don't know where their money is going to. 30% find out through online sources such as their website, their social media, or an email, and that can be vague and not be direct and say exactly where your money is going. And then 11% know by the knowledge of the charity, reputation, and the work that they do, and they don't find out directly again. We believe that transparency will improve donor engagement. As I mentioned on the slide before, 59% of donors don't know where their money is going to. So we believe in building transparency. This includes telling the donor the breakdown of their donation, highlight nonprofits on a website through almost a community page, and then, like I said before, create a community page, and this can include fundraising goals, amounts donated, and show the exact breakdown of what the 2Gift donations go to for the fundraisers. We would also like to maximize the use of a gift card reseller. So the use of Amelon, the gift card reseller, is going to be to connect the businesses to 2Gift. It simplifies it in the way that they don't have to look for the partnerships themselves because Amelon already has them. And through Amelon, there are a lot of diverse options for partners. Like I said, Amelon eliminates the need for nonprofits to advertise for businesses. So that was something that we learned from the interviews, that they felt as though they had to do some of the work in promoting the campaigns. That is now gone. And it provides many more choices to cater to donor preferences, which we talk about in a little bit. So we were given data from Amelon that 2Gift received from them. It gave us discount data on 146 potential businesses to partner with. We analyzed this data to better fit the needs of nonprofits and donors. And then we identified how to best incorporate Amelon into the 2Gift business model. So through this, we found a new target range for gift card denominations. So through this, we could see the amount that consumers spend a month broken down by percentages, and we saw the amount of gift card denominations that are offered through Amelon's website. And we found that there was a big correlation between the $100 to $200 spending range a month. So we believe that 2Gift should aim to sell gift cards at the $100 to $200 range monthly, as this is what the most consumers spend, and the most gift cards are available to purchase.
We also looked at the market that 2Gift operates in, and we looked at 3 competitors: Global Giving, FundScript, and Amazon Smile. These competitors already have an established market, so we know that 2Gift is operating in a successful market. So 2Gift needs to provide something to the nonprofits. Nonprofits usually already have an established way of fundraising, so 2Gift needs to incentivize nonprofit involvement. They can do this through an established 2Gift community to incentivize donations, and through that, 2Gift's any donation amount through the gift cards is appreciated for the nonprofits.
That takes us to our final objective, developing a plan to better reach consumers. To do this, we came up with ways to explain 2Gift better, created a brochure to gain more partnerships, targeted donor interests, expanded the social media engagement, and developed a brand ambassador plan.
So, as mentioned, we wanted to explain 2Gift more effectively, as that was one of the issues that came about in the interviews that we learned. So we did this through creating 2 infographics. The first one you'll see is more visual. This is better suited for a social media post, a website, a brochure. And then we also created a more descriptive infographic, which we think is more suitable for a business pitch or even a presentation. So we then created a campaign brochure that features all of the past partnerships. And in this brochure, we incorporate the infographic that I mentioned before to very basically explain how 2Gift works and what it does. We also incorporate some key statistics on the overall for all the past campaigns. And then in the brochure, we go through each individual campaign. We describe the business and the nonprofit, as well as incorporate statistics for that specific campaign. And then finally, we discuss the transition to the new business model, in which we describe the transition, and then we incorporate the infographic that you guys saw previously in this presentation to show how donors will be using this new business model. And the goal for this brochure is to very basically give it to a nonprofit and show them the success that 2Gift has had in the past.
Then also through our customer survey, we looked at where donors are interested. And we found that donors are interested in supporting healthcare the most, which we found at 34%. Some of examples of a nonprofit with healthcare include helping out donate to hospitals, organizations like the Red Cross and institutes that research cancer and other deadly diseases. So we think that 2Gift future partnerships should incorporate healthcare-focused nonprofits.
We will be finally moving on to our social media engagement portion, which we focus on Instagram. So initially, 2Gift's Instagram startups benefit greatly from successful marketing, which includes brand recognition. Before, their Instagram had 124 followers, and accounts reach were 39 users. We'll get into accounts reach further in the presentation. So using Instagram creates brand recognition, like said previously, and we created 3 goals based off our research. So our 3 goals are bilingual posts, develop personal and humorous content, as well as create a clear message of what 2Gift means. We are using Serendipity's Instagram page as an example. So our first goal is bilingual posts reaches a larger audience. We created posts in Italian, as seen, as well as in English. This will target users of both language to understand 2Gift's goals and accomplishments. We also create personal content that increases engagement. So this is an example of our Instagram story that we created with the faces of 2Gift. And through research, we found that creating more real images rather than graphics has a more genuine connection to the users. And finally, we created posts that define what 2Gift means. On the left is a post defining what 2Gift means by Paolo Leone, one of the founders. And these 3 clips are from our reels that we created that take us through the use of the web app. So after posting these, we looked at Instagram Insights. So Instagram Insights look at the analytics of the followers as well as their demographics. So accounts reach, as mentioned previously, are how many unique accounts have seen your post. Prior to us posting on 2Gift's Instagram, the number of accounts reached were 39. After posting on their Instagram, it raised to 371 users. As well as looking at the accounts reach, we look at the age ranges as well as the follow to non-follow ratios and post types. So through this, we found that we should target posts towards 25 to 44-year-olds, as well as put as an emphasis on Instagram Reels as it reached over 250 users. Finally, we decided to come up with a brand ambassador program to follow up with this social media. So a brand ambassador are people who promote 2Gift to potential donors. These brand ambassadors could be current 2Gift users, volunteers, and people within the nonprofits, which is typically someone who already has a good feel for 2Gift. These ambassadors would create social media content as well as encourage the use of 2Gift through their own social media platforms to reach a larger audience. And finally, 2Gift will do this through incentives like free gift cards and attendance to events, as well as target charitable giving.
All right, and then we have recommendations for future growth for 2Gift after all this. So we start off with how to better reach donors. We believe that they should target health-focused nonprofits, as I mentioned earlier, like the Red Cross and other cancer institutions. And the reason behind this is to get more donors to want to use the 2Gift model because it connects them to the nonprofits in a way where they don't have to spend any additional money. We also recommend reloadable and universal gift cards. So a reloadable gift card basically is where the consumer can load as much money as they want onto the gift cards as many times as they want and continuously can do it instead of buying separate $25 gift cards and $50 gift cards. And it just makes it easier for the consumer. A universal gift card would mean that consumers for 2Gift can spend their money on one gift card and use it at any of the businesses to support one single nonprofit. And then we also have a target selling range of the gift cards at $100 to $200. And this, as we said, is because this is what most consumers spend a month minus groceries, and it's the largest amount of gift cards offered by Amazon. We feel like it would be beneficial to provide a money breakdown in the community page on 2Gift's website to get in more consumers and donors. We also feel that it's very important to continue the upkeep with the social media and ambassador program and continue to share the infographics so people understand how 2Gift operates. And then we have recommendations for better reaching nonprofits. Part of this includes longer campaigns so that the campaigns last year-round. We found that many gift cards last year-round, so that's beneficial in that regard, but also some of the campaigns lasted from 1 month to 2.5 months, and that's not necessarily necessarily enough time for nonprofits to fundraise, so they can benefit more from a year-round campaign where they can reach more money. Also, we believe that they should have a selection of businesses. I think we believe that this is where they hand it off to the nonprofits and allow them to select businesses that they support based off of ethical concerns. And we also think that we should continue to push the brochure for partnerships, which was seen earlier.
And with these proposed recommendations, ToGift will be able to expand the support of nonprofits through shopping. Thank you.